Mr. Roosevelt declared that 3 independent nations in Europe and 1 in Africa had lost their existence. My reply: I do not know which nations are meant by these 3 in Europe. If we are talking about the provinces which have been incorporated back into the German Reich, then I must draw the President's attention to a historical error. These nations did not forfeit their independent existence in Europe now, but in 1918. When they were torn from their communities in breach of a solemn promise, and labeled nations that they never wanted to be, never were. And when an independence was imposed on them that was not independence, but at best could only mean dependence on an international foreign country that they hated. But as for the one nation in Africa that is supposed to have lost its freedom there, this is probably also just a mistake, because it is not one nation in Africa that has lost its freedom, but almost all the former inhabitants of this continent. Almost all the former inhabitants of this continent have been subjected to the sovereignty of other peoples by bloody force, and have therefore lost their freedom. Moroccans, Berbers, Arabs, Negroes, etc. have all fallen victim to foreign violence, whose swords and bombs, of course, did not bear the stamp made in Germany, but made in democracies. Mr. Roosevelt finally demands the willingness to give him the assurance that the German armed forces will not attack the territory or possessions of the following independent nations, and, above all, will not invade them. And he now names the following as possible candidates: Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Great Britain, Ireland, France, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, Russia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Iraq, Arabia, Syria, Palestine, Egypt and Iran. My answer: I first took the trouble to find out from the states mentioned, firstly, whether they felt threatened, and secondly, whether Mr. Roosevelt's request to us in particular was a suggestion on their part, or at least with their consent. The answer was consistently negative, in some cases harshly negative. However, I was unable to send this inquiry to some of the states and nations mentioned, because they, such as Syria, for example, are not currently in possession of their freedom, but are occupied by the military forces of democratic states, and thus deprived of their rights. Mr. Roosevelt also evidently missed the fact that Palestine is not occupied by German troops at the moment, but by the British, and that its freedom is being restricted by the most brutal means and its independence deprived, and that it is suffering the cruelest mistreatment in favor of Jewish invaders. The Arabs living in this country should therefore certainly not have complained to Roosevelt about German aggression, but they complain in constant appeals to the world public about the barbaric methods with which England is trying to force down a people that loves its freedom and is only defending its freedom. This, too, would perhaps be a problem, which, in Mr. Roosevelt's opinion, would have to be solved at the conference table, before a just judge, and not by brute force, by military means, by mass shootings, by burning down villages, blowing up houses, and so on. For one thing is undoubtedly certain: this case England is not acting in defense against an imminent Arab attack on England. But as an invader summoned by no one to establish its power in a foreign territory that does not belong to England. You can therefore find time and leisure, determined by the size of your whole relationship, to deal with universal problems. For you, therefore, the world is certainly so small that you may believe you can intervene and work everywhere with benefit. In this sense, your concerns and suggestions can therefore encompass a much larger and wider area than mine. For my world, Mr. President, is the one in which Providence has placed me, and for which I therefore obliged to work. It is much narrower in space. It embraces only my people, but I believe that this is the best way to serve what we all have at heart: the justice, welfare, progress and peace of the entire human community. Utterly stupid and ignorant people was unleashed upon humanity. In districts where some 140 people per square kilometer have to earn a living, they merely destroyed the order that had been built up over almost 2,000 years of historical development and created disorder without being able or willing to solve the problems facing the communal life of these people, for whom, moreover, as dictators of the New World Order, they had assumed responsibility at the time. However, when this New World Order turned out to be a catastrophe, the democratic peace dictators, American and European alike, were so cowardly that none of them ventured to take responsibility for what occurred. Each put blame on the others, thus endeavoring to save himself from the judgment of history. All felt committed to the announcement of a new national community, which would receive its power from the whole nation. The division into classes and parties was rejected. After the inflation of the international Jews, it completely wrecked the German economy, destroying the existence of millions. Knowledge became the inevitable need for a solution to the problems afflicting the nation.